Hey, everybody. Today for you, podcast number 52. Today's podcast is titled To Infinity and Beyond. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and this is the Limitless Life Network podcast where we flesh out the limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life that you are called to lead. And I want to introduce not one, but two special guests we have tonight. Two of my favorite young men that I know in this world. My middle son Luke, wave to everybody in the
hello everyone
YouTube, in the YouTube land, and then the audio,
YouTube land,
and the audio for all the podcast listeners who are just listening via audio, and then also between the two of us, if you're listening, we have for his first time. His original appearance, his first appearance ever. This is my son, Timothy.
Howdy.
Yeah, listen to that voice. He sounds like he could sing. Anyway, I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for listening. And I really do appreciate your comments. And tonight I could tell a little joke. We were thinking like, hey, we should have a sponsor for tonight. Yeah. And we could yeah, our sponsor tonight is the Phoenician Restaurant. The Phoenician Restaurant in Utica. Fine Lebanese food. And we all just ate there beforehand. And we were talking to the owner, who's a good friend of ours, Shadi, about Shadi Jabbar. Yeah, best Lebanese food that you'll find in Central New York for sure. But we were joking we could have. We said we could have the podcast right in his restaurant. He said, "Oh, as long as you mention my restaurant." So yeah, delicious food. We've been raving fans ever since. But anyway, on with the show. Thank you for listening. If you like the podcast, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Pa-ching, right? And it doesn't make that sound, does it?
If your
always add
ringer's
the
on.
audio.
Okay, there you go. Okay, thank you for the technical clarification. But any comments that you make, likes, shares, all that stuff just really helps get the positive message of what we're trying to help deliver here out to the rest of the world. So that's the cool thing. But on with the show. We don't really have a huge backstory tonight, do we? No. We just were sitting around dinner tonight, and we were talking about having Timothy on the show. And Tim is not an avid listener. He admitted that to the podcast.
That's my honest confession.
The honest confession, not listening to his father's podcast. That's okay. But maybe you will now that you're actually on the episode.
I've advertised it. A lot of friends. I have advertised it.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But anyway, we came up with some great points. And actually, point number one is something that Timothy actually came up with. So what's point number one, Tim?
Point number one is negative self-talk.
Okay, so do you have anything you want to share about that? How would you describe negative self-talk?
Yeah, negative self-talk is the negativity that withstands in our minds. Anything that we just doubt ourselves in, false confidence, anxieties, all that just negativity in our minds that just brings us down to our lower selves, and overall just ruins who we truly are and for what we can truly go for.
Yeah. So I think of it too, and I catch people. I like to try to help people with negative self-talk because you'll say it. People will say things like, oh, I'm no good at math, or I'm no good at whatever it might be. But they'll actually make statements out to the world, out to the universe. They'll put that energy out there with actual words. And we do that from time to time because we just get trained that way. And believe it or not, your subconscious picks that up. Mm-hmm. And then you start to believe it.
Yeah.
Right?
I've been guilty of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I tend to catch myself and find myself realizing that when I put it out there, then I start to believe it. And if I believe it, then that's who I become.
Yeah. So even better than just when you catch yourself, one of the things that I try to do is give people a replacement, which is we try to give them a replacement thought, a replacement statement or affirmation that is the exact opposite of the negative, but the positive. And then it becomes an affirmation of power, an affirmation of authority. And then it lifts your energy, it lifts your mood, it lifts your ability. And I think that's a super good remedy for any of you that catch yourself in negative self-talk. I know I read one time about overcoming behaviors and overcoming negative self-talk. They talked about wearing a rubber band around your wrist. And whenever you said something that was negative, you would just snap yourself with a rubber band. And you would basically give yourself a negative stimulus. And eventually you would be so you didn't like snapping yourself for a couple of reasons. One, it didn't feel good, but two, it was kind of awkward and corny. And so you would basically teach yourself not to do that. I mean, we have a puppy dog right now. Is she crazy or is she crazy?
She's nuts.
Yeah, she's nuts, right?
Wild.
And one of the training tools that we got for her was a shock collar. And we don't have to shock her anymore. She has had a couple of shocks, but not many. I mean, really just a handful. And there's a beep on it and there's a buzzer on it. And if she doesn't listen the first time, if you just beep her or buzz her, she immediately responds now because she doesn't want that negative stimuli. And we're trained that way for sure. So that brings us to point number 2, due in Italian. Point number 2, Luke, I think this was yours, right?
Yeah.
We renamed it though.
Yeah, we did rename it.
Okay.
So the new name is being lulled to sleep. And being lulled to sleep, the original name was being comfortably numb. And being comfortably numb is when something in life is not inherently good, but it's not bad enough to make you want to make a change. So it's comfortable, but it's not ideal.
Yeah.
And so you just go along with it and you go with the flow. And there's a lot of examples in life like that. Like I can think of a few just like in relationships and in your faith life. Like my life's not that bad. I guess I don't need a relationship with God right now. Or this woman in my life or man in my life, they provide me with some things, but I don't get excited every time I see them, so it's comfortable, so I'm gonna stick in it. So being comfortably numb, it's almost better in those situations if it were a little bit worse, so that you would move on and you would find something better than that.
Yeah, I think one of the terms that comes to mind when you describe it now, it sounds like a common behavior, which is toleration.
Yeah.
And we tolerate things because they're not that bad yet, right? So, for instance, it could be a job that you don't like. You certainly don't love it, but you tolerate it because, well, you're getting steady income. And it may not be the income that you're capable of earning. It may not be your true passion, but you tolerate it because it's just not that uncomfortable yet to move on and go out and search for another one. So you just put up with it and you keep putting up with these things. And so we all do this to some degree until we get to a point where we've had enough, right?
Right.
And so what does it take? What does it take for you to have a breakaway moment from those things that you're comfortable with? I know for me, oftentimes a vacation, I come back from a vacation and I make changes that I was unwilling to make when I was in the Matrix, right? So doing everyday life, you are in the fight, so to speak, right? And you don't see everything because you're too busy fighting, right?
You're wrapped up with it.
Yeah. So if you're playing the game, it's really hard to analyze your game, right? So if anybody played sports and you're in the middle of a game, it's really difficult to analyze your technique, right? But I know Luke was a pole vaulter in college.
Right.
What did you do in practice after every vault? What did they had somebody specially doing?
Yeah, they had someone always recording. and you would go back and you'd watch it in slow-mo and be like, okay, now I can see what I'm doing wrong, go back and fix it. And like you were saying in life, when you go on a vacation, you can kind of go on pause, maybe unplug from social media, whatever, and just like being in work all day, and you can see, oh, well, this isn't how I want it to be right now. How can I get to where I want to be? And you can change some things and make a plan for it and act on that.
Yeah. And it's really funny. The title of this, Lulled to Sleep, the title of number 2, came from, I was hanging out with my neighbor this weekend. We were working on an outdoor project, and he has this little Scotty dog called Jagger. And Jagger's so cute, but he's crazy. This dog's crazy. And he's a really good dog. He's super obedient to his master. And while we were working on this project, he was hanging around, then all of a sudden he vanishes and he's gone. And my neighbor's like, that's what he does. He lulls you to sleep. He just thinks that he's just such a good boy, and the next thing he disappears and he doesn't come back.
He's gone.
And then he's gone. And so, that's kind of funny that we just get so comfortable, we get lulled to sleep, and we don't even realize it's happening. We don't even realize that we're so caught up in the work that we're doing, or a relationship that we've been in that's not a really good relationship, whatever it might be. So anyway, and it could be any other habit or behavior. But that brings us to point number 3. I'm going to bounce it back to Timmy to this one, because this point is called acceptance of your uniqueness. And this has to do with like what makes you unique in your behaviors. And Timmy can speak to this, I think, really well, because of our children, Timmy has definitely got some unique gifts that none of us really have.
Yeah. Out of the family, I've always have seen myself as the black sheep. In this way, literally, my family, they're all going into a line of chiropractic school. Luke, you're going soon to South Carolina for chiropractic school. Nate, graduating soon from chiropractic school, and Dad, currently chiropractor. And Grace, future chiropractor, maybe, we don't know. She could be an astronaut farmer, we don't know. But me, I write music, I conduct, and I do art and illustrate. So very, very different from most of the family in my uniqueness, basically. And it's always been like that. I've never really had much of an interest in sports. I mean, the only 2 major sports I've ever really done were track and swim, I believe, and t-ball, really.
T-ball.
But yeah, like, I mean, you guys, you've done track. You held the record at the high school. Nate, he was like the star at the football game, and you, Dad, like, you had a whole history of track, and even to give to him, and to teach. But I was always the one in the bonus room, either playing with action figures, reading comic books, or drawing. And with that, I found myself secluded. I always secluded myself because of this difference. And I found I didn't really see how it was affecting me at the time. Then come to later, to now we're in my close to young adulthood, where I'm like, wow, like, everyone is succeeding so far. Like, Nate's got a family. You're going to these high-end schools, and here I am. I'm still at home. I'm going to a cheap school out in the middle of like a farm field somewhere, with people that you wouldn't really care to look an eye about, because you don't really see like what could be special about them, but there is so much special to them. There's so much potential.
Yeah.
And growing up, I found that hard to see, not just like in other people, because there is so much potential in people, even for you listeners, but for myself mostly. I had such a huge struggle with that, and that led me to a point where I was practically depressed. I was loathing in this somber moment of just where I wanted to sleep. I just wanted to lie down. I didn't want to do anything, because I felt like I could amount to nothing to compare to what you guys were great and succeeding at.
Right.
And that's what led me to want to strive to become as great as what you guys were doing, going to the gym, getting out more, meeting new folks, and pursuing in things and learning as what you guys were doing. But still, I always found it like hard for me. Like it wasn't coming. It wasn't registering through my mind.
Right.
And maybe for some of you that don't know, I have a learning disability, and that's not something that I entitle myself, but as something that I've just kind of grown up knowing. Unfortunately, like the negativity in my mind kind of begins to like overlap that a little bit to where it becomes kind of a title, but I try not to let it, because that can bring you down to that part where you're loathing in that title. But anyways, I have that learning disability, which makes it hard for my left hemisphere, which registers that information and learning, whereas my right is more great at creative thinking and imaginative side, which is more stronger. And so that's where I kind of found myself, was like, oh, my left brain doesn't work. I'm really different compared to my family, because they're all super smart. And honest confession, I haven't done math in 4 years. The last math I ever did was Algebra 1.
Tim, there's a lot of listeners out there that have not done math in 4 years.
Yeah, I bet there's some of you out there that maybe can help relate with me here.
The point is, though, that it's the acceptance of your uniqueness, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the cool thing is that Timmy's sharing like a lot of the pain that he's experienced and where he's come from. And the journey he's on now is really embracing that fact that his right brain is so strong.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to focus on the weakness of the left brain and compare it to the strength of other people's left brain. Like, oh, my weaknesses are so much weaker than your strengths.
Yeah.
But you know what? My right brain is terrible compared to yours, right? It's puny. It's minuscule.
That's the evil of comparison.
Yeah.
Right. And that's it. That's that comparison syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the acceptance of your uniqueness that's been your journey, and that's pretty amazing, because, that in of itself, that's a testimony, that really speaks volumes, because there's so many people just like you that have weaknesses that they think that that's who they are. They think they are their weaknesses, instead of saying, hey, what are my strengths? And that was one of the biggest reasons we took you out of public school, was because public school continued to put a spotlight on your weaknesses instead of highlighting your strengths. And then that's what we tried to pour into, is just highlighting your strengths.
Yeah.
And the school that he goes to highlights his strengths.
Yeah. What I said that like it may seem like there's nothing school out in the middle of a field is completely wrong. There's so much talent within this school. It's called Elam Bible Institute. It's in Lima, Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
And this school is a pastoral school for Christians. But what they don't see a big side of it is it's huge on worship. Almost every out of the 50 students that are there, all are musically talented or artistically talented in a way. Of just this year, every freshman, every one of the 20 freshmen that I went into 2022 with, they all had some sort of unique musical gift. Even if they didn't have it then, to us graduating in 2023, everyone left with some sort of musical talent, whether it was playing bass or drums or keys. And even that like just inspired me to continue on to doing music and to even start leading worship and to actually apply at the International House of Prayer to pursue music as a career and to follow my calling for worship.
Yeah, which is super cool.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, that brings us to point number 4, which has to do with productivity and unproductivity. So point number 4 is, how does this actually happen? How is it that there's times in our life that we can be super productive, but how is it that unproductivity shows up in our life? Where does it even come from? How does it happen? What do you think, guys?
I think most of us have some sort of structure throughout our day, and I think when we lose that structure, because our structures, our mornings are structured, and then our evenings or our middays are structured, and then our evenings are just kind of left to do whatever, and that's where we find ourselves kind of just spacing out, choosing to watch entertainment and not really do the things that we know we should do. It's that thing is like your body wants to do something, but then there's things that you know you need to do that you want to do.
Right. That's interesting. You say that. Like your body wants things, like you crave something, but yet you know there's something else you should be doing.
Yeah.
Right. And so what is that like? I mean, like, can you think of any examples? Like when you're in college, do you guys ever have those moments where you put
all the time.
off writing a paper or studying for a test?
Like I want to study.
I want to
but I
study.
don't feel
Yeah.
like doing it.
Yeah. So and what we call that is that's an emotional calendar. It's an emotional schedule. So you're basically approaching your actions based on emotions instead of based on having like set times and set structure. Like if you were to say like, this is my day and these are the hours, this is where I'm doing this, but then even give yourself break times, right? So one of the most productive people that I know, they work in spurts. They'll do like hardcore, like 3 hours straight of something productive. Then they take a half an hour off and they do absolutely nothing productive on purpose. Like that's scheduled. Like they're not doing anything productive during that half hour. And then it's right back to an hour of productivity. And then another, half an hour of unproductive, and then 2 hours, however they schedule, but it literally is turn it on, turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. So that's a way to kind of solve that.
Yeah, I've started to see, I'm starting to take piano lessons, and something that my instructor had mentioned was that just taking 20 minutes and just like figuring out the keys and just play something. If you don't know the curriculum, at least play something. Move your fingers, touch the ivory keys, do something that is amounting to you making progress into you actually reaching your goal to learn said playing the piano.
Right, right. And that's a huge thing for us too, is oftentimes our unproductivity is because we look at the task of, say, learning how to play the piano is such a big, arduous, long task, but yet it happens through just that repetition, and it's a slow maturity and learning process. We're actually having our home painted by a group of painters, and the reason is because I could paint the house, but it's such a huge task, right? And I could try to get one of the boys to paint the house, but that's a big ask for them, right? Even if I pay them, like it's going to take them all summer. And then we have this crew that shows up with 9 painters, and they bang out painting the house, and they're going to finish it in 2.5 days.
Right.
And it's like literally would take me all summer to try to do that myself on weekends and nights, and I would hate it.
Yeah.
Right?
There's some things in life you have to delegate because it takes up too much of your time, and it's not necessarily it's things that you need to do, but it's not the things that are towards your goals.
Right, right.
Which I've kind of started implementing in my life is if it's not helping me towards my goals, then I defer it to someone else, or I find something to automate it or make life flow easier so I can focus on tasks that are important.
Yeah. Smart. Good. All right, last one. Point number 5. Point number 5 is probably where we got the title from. Definitely where we got the title from.
Yeah.
Point number 5 is the infinite love we struggle to grasp. And this is something that I was reading about recently, and it was really talking about God's love for us and how it is a love that is eternal, meaning that God loved us before we were even born. And that's pretty unique, right? To think that there's a God, our creator, that loved us before we were even born. And not only just a day before we were even born, but 10 years before we were born, 100 years, 1,000 years before we were born, he knew you perfectly. And that's hard for us to grasp, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like literally an eternity before you were born, he loved you. And that deep love is not just a love of like, oh, I love you, like, but it's a love that's in every capacity we need love. It's like when you're broken, he loves you in those situations. He loves you when you need compassion. He loves you when you need strength. He loves you when you need endurance. He loves you in all those situations, and he loves your uniqueness, right? Like he loves you when you're sad. He loves you when you're depressed. He loves you when you're anxious. He loves you in all those situations, and it's an eternal love that he loves you for eternity. And the only condition is that you follow him.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. And to know that you have a father that created you and that loves you that much, I hope that gives you so much energy and joy to go out this week and just have an amazing week until we do this again next week. So that's all we have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. Thank you, and be sure to tune in each and every week so that you can stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward your best life by stripping away your limitations. And we will see you next time.